Hey, this is Professor Triplet, and we're going to do a quick tutorial on selecting things in Maya. We've already gone over a lot of selection methods, but we want to get a little bit more in depth because we're going to be beginning poly modeling, and selection is really important. So obviously, when we're in our object selection mode, which we are right now, we can just click on anything we see and we can select it. We have these little rollouts here. Yours might be closed, but if you have a little triangle here, you click on that, and then I can go ahead and turn off selection of certain things. Like if I don't want to be able to select curves, if I hit this button here now, I try to select my curve. I can't select it. I can't click on it. But the moment I turn that back on, I can. So that'll help you filter your selections if you have things like layered on top of each other. So now I've got my surfaces or polygons I can't select. So okay, you can see how that changes. Obviously the outliner is one way to select things. You can close your outliner, you can open it back up right here in your menu for in your Windows menu. That's one way to just select things, but this is all in the object mode. So what we need to do is we need to get to a point where we can select the component mode. So to do that, the first thing we can do is actually, whatever object you select, if you hit F8, that will actually go into one of the component modes. In this case, it went right into my verts. Okay. If I hit F8 again, it actually jumps back out to my object mode. So if you don't want to use your marking menus like this, I'm just right-clicking and holding and dragging my mouse. You can do it this way too. You can go to your verts, but you can also just hit F8 on your keyboard to get out of that. And to get into your verts automatically, you can hit F9. So there's F9, F10 will let you select your edges, F11 will let you select faces, and F12 is your UVs. Okay, so those are your three, or I should say four, major component selection tools that you can use other than your marking menu. If you notice up here, these are changing as I hit my keyboard. So if I hit my F9 key, for instance, you can see that this changed to verts. Well, this is a button that you can use to change your selection mode as well. So this is in the modeling toolkit, of course. Let me show you. Normally you're in your attribute editor or your channel box comes up, but you can hit this modeling toolkit, which is the last icon up here on the right. And well, I could say it's the first, depending on which side you're reading from. But the first icon is the modeling toolkit, and you can select through that. I will note, though, that I've had times where I had this modeling toolkit out and I've selected stuff like this, and for some reason it got weird and it didn't select correctly. So if that happens, just try using your marking menu if you're having problems selecting something, or try using like F9, F10, F11. Okay, you can also do this multi-component, which will allow you to select the faces, edges, and verts all at the same time. You know what, this is not exactly brand new, but it's newer, and when I first learned, I never had anything like this. So I just switch between, but if you find this convenient for yourself, by all means you can have your multi-component on and you can use that. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is let's go ahead and look at our select menu a little bit. I'm just going to pull this out, and let's go ahead and hit all. Well, it didn't select anything because we're still in component mode. So if I go back to my object mode and I hit all, you can see it selects everything. If I select just, let's say, two things and say inverse, you can see it's going to select the two things that were not selected. Let's go back into our verts, or actually let's do faces. So let's go back to our faces. Alright, so we're going to select part of our faces here, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit inverse on this. Now, the inverse works the same way in this menu as it does on the object level, except for it's just going to select the inverse of the polygons or whatever component mode you're on. So the fast way to do that is Control-Shift-I. So I'm just doing it by a keyboard shortcut now, and much easier when you get used to doing it that way. Okay, and there's a whole bunch of options in here. I don't want to go through every single one of them. but we'll talk about some of them. So deselect all, obviously is going to deselect this, and I kind of like to look at it like this. So let's go ahead and go into that. So I'm going to select one polygon right here, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit grow, so you can see what that's doing. So the keyboard shortcut is your greater than key. So if you go ahead and actually you have to hold shift. So you hold shift and you hit it and it'll grow. And then the less than key, you hold shift and hit it and it'll shrink. Now they've got this new one here, and this is nice. This is something I've wanted for a long time. So I'm going to show you how this works. So if I go to my edge, and I'm going to select two edges, it has grow along loop. So I can go ahead and hit this button, and you can see what's happening is that it's increasing just on the edge loop. And then you can shrink along loop as well, and that's a nice little tool in case you just want to select a certain amount of edge loops, edge rings, or whatever. Actually, they don't have an edge ring one, it doesn't look like yet, so maybe that's coming in the next version. Quick selection sets are actually, they can be pretty important, but I'm going to leave that for another tutorial. Basically, what they do is you can select a number of things. Let's say, like, let's do faces, and then you can make a quick selection set of that, and then you can come back and reselect those same faces if you need to. And they're actually not, you don't make them in here, you make them over here in sets. So I can go ahead and say quick select sets right down here actually. And then I can give it a name and say polys. Did I say I wasn't going to show you this now? I did. I lied. So I just made it. And you'll see in your outliner, it basically numbers all of the polygons that you have in that. And then so let's deselect that. Quick select sets, and there's the polys, and I select it, and then it comes back up. I guess I should show that now because that's pretty useful. Okay, so you can see right here, F8 is object component. So if I hit that, it's the same thing as hitting F8 on my keyboard. Now I'm in object mode. Components, you can go right to your components from here as well, like vertices, and you'll see that the keys, the hotkeys for them are right here. So we're not going to talk about vertex faces because honestly, I just never use these, but they're here. If you ever get something that looks like this, you're in vertex face mode. Okay, so all you have to do is just, hit F9 or something to get out of it. Okay, so these tools, honestly, this continuous edge mode, sometimes they act wonky. I don't really use it. I shouldn't say that. No, the continuous edge one works fine. My bad. It's the shortest edge tool that doesn't work great all the time. This is important, the convert selection. So sometimes you've got your faces selected, right? And you want to convert that to, let's say, verts. So you can go convert selection and to vertices. And so you can see it selected all the vertices that were touching those polygons. And that can be pretty important. That's very, very useful. Of course, you can reverse that as well. So we can go, I keep losing it here on my keyboard, or I should say my screen. So to face, so we can go to face. And now it looks like it added it because it was any vert or any face that was touching any of those verts. So it actually grew it a little bit. So that wasn't exactly perfect, as you can see. So I just undid it. Anyway, the way I usually do this though is there's a marking menu for this. So if I hold Control and then I right click and hold down, you get a marking menu that says like to vertices, like that, and then that is how I convert. I usually don't come to the menu to do it. And so you've also got, two UVs, two faces. That's what we already have selected, of course, two edges, and then it selects all the edges. So that's very, very convenient. There's times that you need a tool like that. All right, so what else do we use in here? Obviously, these components are for nerves, and that's what the heading says. You can select, so that's actually why I have a curve here. I can say all CVs. Let's get out of this. Let's go back to object mode. Let's go ahead and hit first curve, and apparently it wants me to select this. Now I've got it. Okay, so you can do that, or you can hit last curve, or you can say all CVs and select that. Just another selection tool. Selection boundary, let's go ahead and show this. All right, let's just delete that. All right. So let's go into our edges, hit F10 for edges, and oh wait, that's a CV boundary. Wrong one. If you want to select the boundary, just double click it and it'll select the entire boundary. I forgot this was a CV selection boundary. I was thinking of the wrong thing. Let's see if this works in here. Okay, so it's selecting where the border is. So if you're using NURB surfaces, which we're not getting into too much, but it does have a border, and that's what these are for selecting. So okay, so that's it for this menu. That's the main things that we'll be using, and I think now you'll have a good start on selection. One last thing. Let's talk a little bit about like if you want to select face loops. So I can go ahead, just like we have edge loops, you can consider all these faces that are in a line a face loop. So if I select one and then I hold shift and I double click on the next one, you can see it'll select the entire loop that goes around. If I select one and then I shift double click on a polygon further down that's within the face loop, it'll select in between those two. So that's important. And what I just did there works exactly the same way for edges. So if I double click on an edge, it'll select it. If I click once on one edge and then shift and double click, it'll select the edge loops before or between those. And actually, it does work the same for vertices as well. So you can shift and then you can double click and select vertices just the same way. And I can click once and then shift, double click here, and it'll select around the whole entire object. So that's very, very convenient. Something that definitely I have used many, many times. And it probably wouldn't be a good selection tutorial if I didn't mention edge rings. So let's go ahead and look at edge rings as well. So if I have an edge like so, and if I hold Control, right click, I can go ahead and do an edge ring utility like this. And you can see the edge ring is basically, it's almost kind of like the opposite of the loop. The loop is like a continuous line. The ring is like if it was a sidewalk, these would be the separation panels in the sidewalk, whereas the loop would be the edge of the sidewalk that goes down the street, if you will, or along the street. So the edge ring, you can kind of do the same thing, or not kind of, you can do the same thing as with the loop. I can click here, shift click here, and double click, and I get the edge ring. So the first way I showed you was actually kind of the slow way. This is the fast way. And I can click here and then shift double click here, and it'll select the edge ring in between these. And this might be used with a tool like this, like you want to connect these together, and I can just hit enter to drop it. So if you needed something like that, where you needed some edges in there, so that's one way that the edge ring can be useful. I guess one other thing maybe we can talk about with selections is you do have a soft select here. So if I double click on my tool, and that's how I brought this up, I just double clicked on it. In your tool settings, you can turn on a soft select, and what it happens is you get this fall off. That's what the colors represent, and you can kind of deform things nicely. So that's part of selections too. You can change how that fall off behaves, and you can also change like the fall off. Of course, you can change the colors, but you can actually slide these around and say like, oh, I want it to be really tight up front and then fall off, or vice versa. Let's use the normal one. So you can go ahead and mess around with that, and you can mess around with the range, obviously. And then the fall off mode goes based on like volume is looking at the volume of the object. Surface is going actually by the surface. So if I have two objects, like let's just say, I'm going to show you something a little more advanced. I'm going to combine these two objects. So, sorry, there we go. Combine. Okay, so if I have these two and I say face, let me just turn this way up. So, because this is set to surface, it's only going to touch this surface, not this surface. But if I hit volume, let's turn this up more. You can see now, actually, it just changed color there. So the volume gets larger, and it's actually touching this. And global, it's hitting everything. So that's kind of interesting, right? Let's see what happens. Look at that. Interesting. That's the first time I ever turned on global. And object would be obvious. It would be the single object that we're trying to affect. But it looks like, I guess it affects all the objects. Okay, interesting. And then that's working more on, it's not bending it. It looks like it's actually just moving the objects in a soft way. That's very interesting. I have to say I've never played with these last two there. So I just learned something myself. Anyway, that's selection in a nutshell. There's more to it, but that'll get you pretty far. Thanks for watching.